Pittsburgh Steelers going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this team in 2021. So last year, 12-4, last undefeated team in the NFL. Obviously, had a bunch of stuff going for them, at least early in the year. Did not end up finishing the way they wanted. Had a really tough stretch at the end, and obviously lost to the Browns in the first round of the playoffs. Now, this team had a bunch of positives to take away from that start, especially defensively, which we'll talk about. But offensively, they have a lot of problems, and a lot of that stuff obviously caught up to them. As far as my performance on them, we making a bunch of money. 15-6-1 on strong bets, way, way, way above where you want to be. Not perfect, obviously 25-18-1 overall. I definitely was a little slow to come around on them being not as good as I thought towards like week 10 to 15. I will say a good example of that is like the Bills game they lost towards the end of the year, that type of thing. But overall, we chilling. So talking about their roster specifically, you start with the losses, and frankly, those first four, right, were all starters on this offensive line. That is going to be an issue no matter what happens. But individually, Andre Villanueva is not very good. He hadn't been good for a while. He does fit the scheme okay, and there's some things he does at an NFL level, but as far as they're not going to miss him. Matt Filer, they will miss more. He was definitely a decent player. Marquise Pouncey also hasn't been good in a couple of years. He retired, whatever. David DeCastro, that's the bad one. David DeCastro is legitimately good, and they cut him as a cap thing. That's one of the more confusing things you're going to see. They'll definitely miss him. Vance McDonald retired, whatever. Deion Kane, rotational receiver. Defensively, again, a lot of guys who played snaps. Some matter, some don't. Steven Nelson, Mike Hilton, both corners that they will miss. Steven Nelson has played well as the number 2 corner in the system for years. He's not elite. He's very far from it, but he does provide a baseline of corner play that was pretty safe and allowed them to do a lot of things around the rest of the field that they're going to miss. Mike Hilton as well, one of the elite slot corners in football, fit this scheme amazingly. Super good run player, just an awesome player overall. Bud Dupree, going into last year, I definitely thought he was pretty bad. I came around on him a little bit. He's still, he's kind of whatever as a pass rusher, but again, he's a good athlete. He does some okay things as a speed rusher, enough that losing him isn't nothing. Avery Williamson, midseason trade, not good. Vince Williams hasn't, again, older player, hasn't been good in a few years. Ola Denier, rotational guy, whatever. As far as additions goes, so you bring in Deontay Collins and you trade for some reason for Rashad Coward. Yikes. We'll talk about them more individually as we go through the roster and everything, but that's tough. And then Joe Hague too. What the hell, man? Joe Hague was so bad last year. He individually lost a game for the Buccaneers pretty much, which sounds impossible, but against the Saints early in the season, it was not the first game, the same game. He was wow. Marcus Bach, Kalen Balaj, whatever guys. Defensively, this I like more. Arthur Mullet, he has some games to him. He's been on the horrible Jets where some of their weaknesses got exposed more than they should have been, but he overall can play okay. Melvin Ingram, I like that signing a lot. He's going to do a lot of things that Bud Dupree did, but a lot better. Cassius Marsh, actually kind of an okay player, despite how much he bounces around. And then they trade for Joe Schobert just recently. That one I'm a little confused about, given what else is on the roster, but he's okay. And again, he's a guy who fits the scheme decently. As far as their rookies go, this is their draft class. We'll talk about how good the rookies are once they actually play in the NFL. Until then, I ain't much concerned about it, so not a big deal. But this is what the draft class looks like. So position by position, let's go through this roster. Number in the top right is the total number of players I've ranked at that position. Number to the right of the name is where that player is out of that total. So Ben Roethlisberger, 17th best quarterback in the NFL. Big Ben is still fine. What you get with him, right, he's one of the easier quarterbacks to kind of outline in the whole NFL. He's going to be a guy at this point in his career who makes decisions very quickly, gets the ball off exceedingly quickly, which partly was a function of the offense that he's been playing in, but a lot of it has to do with him too. Is going to do that at a good level. He's not going to make many mistakes. He is going to mentally process defenses again very quickly and get the ball off when he's supposed to. Now, he is a statue in the pocket at this point. While he can slide a little bit, he's never going to be a guy who's escaping free pressure, really. Obviously, doesn't add anything with his legs. And frankly, he limits the upside of your offense because he just doesn't push the ball downfield that much. Now, he will take some outside 1v1 shots at times. He's not like some backup quarterbacks with that. But overall, compared to the other good starters around the league, he's definitely not pushing the ball down the field into these positive areas that provide a lot of value for your offense nearly as much. He also is going to get a lot of balls tipped to the line of scrimmage by throwing so quickly. Again, he's just kind of keeping you from a lot of big gains and stuff like that. Backup-wise, so Mason Rudolph is bad. He definitely towards the bottom of backup quarterbacks. He's not somebody who's going to come in and really give you a whole lot of chance to have a good offense. Now, he's not so bad that's impossible for your offense to function and you're just going to lose, right? We literally saw him start games and go like 500 with the Steelers a couple of years ago with, a historically good defense, but right, that's what you get. Dwayne Haskins is not going to be somebody who's going to develop into a starter. He does share a lot of similarities with Big Ben as far as a guy who's going to throw the ball, make quick decisions, and execute your offense on time. Difference is he's just not good at it. He doesn't consistently make correct decisions. He makes quick decisions, but he ends up throwing the ball like at linebackers or at corners. He doesn't understand how defenses move, how they're going to move after the snap, all that type of stuff. Very, very far behind. He's also same thing with Ben. Statue in the pocket, doesn't really avoid pressure at all. He's a little bit better, not than Ben, but he's a little bit better than like a statue as far as sliding around a little bit. But overall, he's just not a player who really has much of a ceiling or is ever going to be good. Josh Dobbs, too. He's a smart player, hung around the NFL for a long time, but no one you want anywhere near a field in the regular season. At running back, so Naji Harris is a rookie. And I mentioned earlier, I don't really speculate on how good rookies are going to be because I don't want to create expectations when you're objectively trying to make money, right? So you don't want to do that before guys even play. With a first-round running back, however, I'm actually more willing to do it because, one, it doesn't matter, and two, it's pretty likely that a first-round running back is going to be good. Like, obviously, there's, every so often there's a Trent Richardson or something like that. But most of the time, if you're drafting the first round as a running back, you're going to be talented enough to do what you need to do and be productive on the ground, which is the case with Naji Harris. Is he going to be better than that? Maybe. I don't really care. And he's almost no way he's good enough to be in the top 2-3 where he really matters anyway. Backup wise, so you have Benny Snell. Benny Snell is just too slow to matter. He will put his head down between the tackles and gain create a couple yards through contact and that type of stuff. But he is consistently limiting your offense every time you give him a carry because he's just not explosive or quick enough to make use of the space that's given to him, even if he had a good run blocking offensive line. Anthony McFarland at least has that. He doesn't really show vision or a lot of, balance or power or anything like that, but the dude is fast and he's quick. And that at least gives you something if you were to give him touches. Jalen Samuels fits very much into the category of technically a receiving back because the team gives him targets, but isn't adding any value, much like a Devontae Booker or a Theo Riddick of old, something like that. He'll catch the ball, I guess, but he's not actually ever going to be the one individually who's adding value, adding yards to your offense. Trey Edmonds is kind of a half fullback, half running back. He's really bad. Just runs literally straight forward in the line of scrimmage. Keelan Ballage, he comes over. He's actually, he's a big guy who is fast in a straight line. Which is the type of thing that overall, he'll have issues with making guys miss or converting third downs, that type of shit. But if something happens and there is a crease, right, for whatever reason in the run game, he is actually fast enough to take advantage of it. And at his size, he can bounce off some tackles at times. He's not good, but he's not super awful. So the wide receiver. So this is I don't know if most important, because I think the offensive line is most important, but most widely recognized valuable part of this offense. And it is pretty good. However, I will very much fight back on the concept that they're one of the best in the league because they really lack the high-end talent in this room. It's a bunch of guys who are very much worthy of starting, to be clear. They are very deep and they're definitely good. However, as we go through these players individually, you kind of see that they all have their flaws that are kind of meaningful. So start at the top, Dionte Johnson. Dionte Johnson does the number one most valuable thing a modern NFL receiver can do, which is why I think he's a wide receiver one. And that's the dude just gets open so quick, so good as a route runner, that he is going to be open the vast majority of the time, especially between 0 and 15 yards. Very, very good. He's actually decent after the catch. While he is a little weak, he can do some things there. And overall, that skill is just so valuable and he's so good at it that he's always going to be a useful player. He does have real issues with drops. Now his aren't so concerning. A lot of those were concentration drops. There's receivers around the league where you see them drop and you see why, and they just look uncomfortable. A player like Deebo Samuel is a good example of that, where his ball skills are just garbage. Dionte Johnson, that's not really the case. It is more, again, some concentration drops, but it's not nothing, right? And while he is a good route runner and a good separator, he's not elite. He's not Stephon Diggs out here, and that's kind of what keeps him away from the top tier. Then you get to Chase Claypool. Obviously, he scored a lot of touchdowns, super fantasy relevant his rookie year. As an actual on-field receiver, though, he's okay. But that's about as far as I'm willing to go with it right now. Now he is going into his second year receiver. A lot of players get better in that kind of timeline. But as a player currently, given what he's done on the field, he's a guy who doesn't really create much separation. He does okay short. He's such a big body that he can kind of turn himself around in certain ways to sit in space. And I will grant that the route trees that the Steelers receiver run kind of limited his ability to showcase that talent. But outside of a very few highlights where he was running, one-on-one with the corner straight down the sideline, which is a fairly inconsistent way to win no matter what. He's not somebody who's really going to get particularly open. He does show good ability after the catch, a really big, strong guy. His athleticism definitely shows through there. I think that's the number one place where it most does. But yeah, he's a guy who's kind of limited in his initial route tree, and that's going to limit the consistency of his ability to demand targets and that type of thing. But overall, he's a good player. He's definitely starter worthy, all that stuff. Juju Smith-Schuster, fairly similar story, actually. He does not have the talent, to be the receiver that everybody wants him to be or wanted him to be after that, super breakout year, whatever, his second year when he had 160 targets, something like that. He's a guy who is going to win okay between 5 and 15 yards. And he's going to do good things after the catch because he's big, fast, and strong. That's about it, though. Again, similar to Claypool, he's actually worse. He's not good at separating down the field, barely at all. While he can occasionally make some contested catches pretty good, it's not like he's elite at that skill. And overall, as a receiver, he definitely has useful things. He's a worthy starting player, but he's not a high-end talent or somebody that's going to consistently drive your offense up and down the field. Then James Washington, the fourth of the starter level players, definitely the fourth of the four we've talked about, but he has a different skill set than the other guys, and he's actually pretty valuable on this team because he is the only one really who's going to win downfield with any level of consistency. Maybe Claypool gets there this year. I actually maybe expect it, but James Washington, as of right now, he's a guy who can get steps downfield as a vertical route runner. He has good ball skills. While he's not super big, he can make contested catches, all that type of stuff. Now, the rest of it, he's not very good at, not super physical in routes, not going to get open near the line of scrimmage, even the way that the other guys do. And overall, he's just kind of whatever. As a fourth receiver, though, he's more overqualified for that position. You also have Ray McLeod. He's a returner, really, but he's very good at that, and he shows the ability that some of these returners do. Because some returners, right, when you throw them on offense, just kind of end up being really bad and not useful. Really, Ray McLeod, that's not the case. He can do things with bubble screens and jet sweeps. They're at least useful, and I like him in the room at the very least. At tight end, whatever. Eric Ebron is. So I guess he's at the lower level of starter worthy. He is going to run routes the way your offense asks and generally be open if he was supposed to be. He occasionally can come through with some, he's a really big guy, so he can come through with some contested catches and that type of thing at times. But it's never something that's really consistent. He obviously notoriously has kind of bad hands, especially contested, which isn't necessarily something you want out of a tight end. He's not a good blocker, and he's not somebody who's actually creating separation himself most of the time, or barely any of the time. He's just kind of out there doing what you ask him to do, which it is what it is. Pat Freiermuth, second-round tight end. A lot of people are excited about him. He is a rookie. We'll see. Most tight end rookies are not very good, so I'm not going to make a judgment on him yet. And then nobody else that's really worth talking about. So the offensive line. This ended up, towards the end of the year, really, really being the problem. Is that going to be the case again this year? Well, let's talk about it. So start off with a positive. Chukwuma Okorafor. He is a decent player. He's not great. He's not somebody who adds a lot of value, especially as a run blocker. He's pretty below average, but that's obviously passing the ball is a lot more important. And as far as that goes, as far as the pass picture, he is definitely competent. He is not going to lose or get fucking smoked very often or really much at all. And while he can struggle against the high-end pass rushers, for sure, Myles Garrett in this division, that would scare me to shit. That applies to a whole lot of players around the league. That's not really that big of a knock on him. He's definitely okay. He can keep up with a lot of guys. I'm comfortable with him as a starter. At the other spot, we'll see what happens. So Zach Banner right now is slated to start there. Zach Banner is a former tight end who's been with the Steelers for a long time and was going into last year going to make his first starts at tackle. And then he tore his ACL either, I don't remember if it was the first game of the season or the end of the preseason, one of the two. But he kind of missed that chance. Now, I was a little bit encouraged about him going into that year because he has played a lot of snaps as like a tight end and or sixth blocker for the Steelers, and he's done pretty well in that time. However, being a starting offensive tackle and being a sixth lineman in there to run block are very, very different things, and I'm very much unwilling to be sure he's going to be good or even not bad. Because as a pass protector, that is just a gigantic question mark. And as a former tight end in his first real consistent snaps in that aspect is not likely to go all that well. And while I do think he's going to be good as a run blocker, or very least serviceable, is he going to be like a dominant force there? Again, I really doubt that. You do also have Dan Moore, who is a rookie who's been super good in the preseason. Now, with rookies, I don't really like to talk about him, whatever, but he is also there and might end up making starts. Also, you bring in Aviante Collins from the Vikings. I don't know. He's not a player who should ever be starting. Chaz Green gave up 6 sacks in a game for a reason. He's very bad. So then we get to guard. And again, you kind of start with a similar player in Kevin Dodson, where Kevin Dodson was a rookie last year who was kind of good for a rookie. He didn't fuck up all that much. He actually showcased some ability to be a mover in the run game. Some is the key word there. And as a pass protector, yeah, he was never particularly bad. He does worry me about for sure against the higher end guys, just like a core 4, but overall I'm comfortable with him starting. At the other spot, Trey Turner. Trey Turner was hurt a ton last year, and when he was playing even, he was clearly still hampered by injuries. However, when he's healthy, which as of right now he is, he's pretty damn good. Trey Turner is a guy who generates a lot of push in the run game. And as a pass protector, like the dude, he can play. There are occasionally some snaps where he's going to just miss right at the line of scrimmage and get left in the dust, which is a concern. But that doesn't happen all that frequently. It's not like, that happens to a lot of players. That happens to Quentin Nelson sometimes too, right? It's a lot more frequent with Trey Turner, but just to be clear that's not like a deal breaker. He's overall, he's all right, and I'm definitely comfortable with them going into the year with him healthy as a starter. Past that, though, again, Rashad Coward is real bad. He's been with the Bears. He's just a guy who he doesn't do anything that helps you. Right? Like he doesn't push in the run game. He's not a good athlete that's going to like cut off angles or anything like that. And as a pass protector, he's going to get beaten consistently. And they traded for that. And then, like I said, Joe Hague is horrible. He individually lost the game for the second Buccaneers game against the Saints. He gave up effectively four sacks to David Onyemata. I think Trey Hendrickson cleaned up some of those, but whatever. The guy's really bad, especially as a guard. And then at center, this is really because the other guys, at least there's hope, and/or I'm pretty comfortable with them being okay. At center, not so much. J.C. Hassenauer is, as far as I'm concerned right now, the worst center in the NFL. He played a few games at the end of last year, and he was so comically bad that he has a chance to torpedo this whole offense from the very beginning. Now, if he's that bad, obviously he won't start that many games. But, as a player, he's just a guy who would get shoved 5 yards back off the ball on like a snap-by-snap basis. I mean, we're talking affect almost every play. He was losing and not doing what he was supposed to be doing. It's hard as a center to be bad enough for your offense to even notice. J.C. Hassenauer, he is at that level. Now, he got thrown into the lineup after Pouncey's injuries. He's a fairly young player. Could he get better? I suppose. But I am very, very discouraged, especially because it seems like they're kind of just letting him do it at this point. Now, they do have Kendrick Green, who's a third-round pick, who you praying if you're a Steelers fan is good enough to start by week 2 when J.C. Hassenauer gets benched, but that's not something you can count on. So, yeah, that is a really big concern because when you look at this offense as a whole, right, I will say that they do kind of have a high floor because you were talking about Ben Roethlisberger throwing to a group of good receivers. Not great receivers, but good receivers. That and doing it in a way that is pretty repeatable as far as getting the ball out quick and letting them make plays after the catch, which they can do. That creates a pretty decent floor for your offense because that is through the pass game. And offensively, right, their offensive line despite how bad parts of it are, it's hard to be bad enough to get your team rocked if you're throwing the ball in less than 3 seconds every play. The Saints are a very good example of that. Now, they have very good offensive line, but that's even if they didn't, you wouldn't notice it really the same all the time. However, outside of that one pathway to success, it's tough because this team is not going to be able to run the ball very well, probably. They had one of the worst run schemes across the entirety of the NFL over the last few years. They run a bunch of dumbass draw plays that don't go anywhere and don't work. And while they did change offensive coordinators, I'm not going to assume that gets better until I see it on the field. And combined with that, the only real positive as a run blocker is Trey Turner. Maybe Zach Banner is, but that's such a big question mark. It's not something worth betting on. And then you have Hassenauer in the middle getting fucking smoked every play. So, like, they're not going to be good at that. And as a downfield passing attack, well, yes, they will certainly have highlights because Chase Claypool, James Washington, and even the other two, like, they can function down the field. They're good enough to do that. It's not something that's very consistent. And with how the offensive line is, the longer plays go, the more I'm worried about that ability. And that combines on top of that with Ben Roethlisberger's kind of unwillingness generally to push the ball down the field, especially at this age. Overall, it's just tough. Like I said, the wide receivers give them like a high enough floor where it's hard to see them scoring less than 15, 16, 17 points. But it's asking a lot or asking for a real bad difference to see them get even in the 30 range. So that's where the Steelers are offensively. However, there's two sides of the ball, and defensively things look a whole lot better because this is a team that's been dominant for years and still has a lot of the pieces that made them that way. Specifically, this front three. Stephon Tuitt is very, very good. He's a player who affects both the pass game and the run game very consistently. He has amazing hands, very explosive, gets in the backfield, actually makes plays, and gets to the quarterback. Awesome player. Cam Hayward on the other side, the dude is literally everything you could ask for in defensive tackle. While he's not the explosive guy that Tuitt is, so he's not going to win and get to the quarterback in the same way as far as within the first 2-3 seconds of a play. He's like a ticking time bomb or whatever. As far as if he's rushing the passer for 5 seconds, he's going to be so strong and technically good and not give up that he's going to make them deal with him as the play goes. He does everything as a run defender as far as eating up blocks, controlling offensive linemen, making the running backs go to the gaps that he wants them to where he knows he has help. Cam Hayward is awesome. While he does kind of miss the high end of explosive production, whatever, he's still really, really good. And it knows Tyson Alu, they found a perfect role for him. He is one of the best, pure, penetrating, quick, playmaking nose tackles we have in the NFL right now. He's a little bit undersized for that spot, but they did a unique thing where, most teams opt for these big fat guys at nose tackle. They went the other way with Tyson Alu, who's been a defensive end throughout a lot of his career. And yeah, he's good at it. He beats centers very frequently, pretty quickly. He makes a lot of plays, all that type of stuff. And he's good enough where even if he doesn't beat the guy right away, he's not going to get hammered at the point of attack in the run game. So big fan of that. And then depth-wise, they got a bunch of players here too. Chris Wormley is a good backup. He's a lot closer to just a big fat run defender, but he can do that well. Isaiah Bugg's kind of the same thing, but again, good in that role and even has a little bit of explosiveness to him. And then Carlos Davis, is a young player who flashed just a little bit at times. Not something I'm super excited about, but he's not nothing. Then Henry Mondo, even as an outside guy, he was okay too. He actually played some snaps last year. Never going to be somebody I'm worried about again on the high end, but dude got something. And then on the edge, we start number one, TJ Watt. Very clearly, as far as I'm concerned, the second best pass rusher or edge player in the NFL behind Myles Garrett. TJ Watt is a absolutely dominant player. So good. He's a crazy good pass rusher, specifically because he has kind of a skill set that's lost in a lot of other guys as far as a true edge bending superstar pass rushers. A lot of guys who try to do that but aren't very good at it. TJ Watt is one of the ones who's good at it. And beyond that, he's a lot better than good. He's very, very good at it, which is nice because most modern NFL tackles aren't particularly equipped to deal with that very well. These guys are just so big nowadays that if you have somebody who's so good at it, that's how you get a player who's as good as TJ Watt. Now, that's not to say he's a one-trick pony. He can do everything else too. He's a very good run defender. Not quite elite, but very, very, very good. And he has other moves as a pass rusher too. TJ Watt is amazing. He's so good. On the other edge, we'll see how this goes. Alex Highsmith is a player who's gotten quite a bit of hype as the number 2 edge player for the Steelers this year, and he's going to start most of their games, it seems like. I am not all that excited about it, though, personally. So I will say he played enough his rookie year and did enough decent things for me to be pretty confident that he's not going to suck. Like, he's not going to be out there just out of his depth and being the reason the team's bad. I'm very sure about that. However, as like a high-end player, I don't really see it at all. He's not somebody who's like making plays a lot. He's not somebody who's particularly explosive, either as a penetrator in the run game or as a pass rusher, even holding the edge. He has decent play strength, but like nothing that's like, oh yeah, you're not moving him off his spot. Nothing like that. So yeah, overall he's okay. I don't really think it gets much past that. However, you bring in Melvin Ingram. Melvin Ingram is a player who is much past just okay. Going to play a more limited role, which at his age, it's decent. He also has a lot of injury issues, but if he's healthy on the field, he is a guy who legitimately provides a number 2 source of pass rush from multiple areas on the field here, because how good they are in the interior, play mostly outside, but he can do things. He's very technically skilled. He's a big time power rusher. He's just overall very good and provides something a lot different than TJ Watt that helps a lot. And even as a run defender, disciplined, smart, strong, like he's a lot of that stuff again at his age, maybe not what you want him doing so much. And they probably won't ask him to do that much, but very, very useful player. That signing. Fantastic. Then you also have Cassius Marsh. Again, he's a guy who's actually, I think, been underrated a little throughout his career. He's bounced around a lot of teams. He is undersized. He's never going to be a high-impact player. But, like, the dude can, he can set an edge a little bit. He's okay. At off-ball linebacker, so you get Devin Bush back. He missed all last year, I believe, with a knee injury. And, they definitely missed him. He is a absolutely good player. And specifically in this scheme, he fits it better than a lot of other players do because Devin Bush has wild speed and athleticism. That's what got him drafted so high in the first round, and that really shows up as the guy in the middle of this Pittsburgh zone. Because you got to remember, the Steelers ask a ton from the linebackers to cover a bunch of space in the middle of the field. They play this complicated zone blitz defense for a lot of times. 5-6 guys are rushing, and it leaves, and then they kind of play their corners mostly outside the numbers. So it leaves the linebackers to kind of cover everything else. And Devin Bush is about as close as you're going to get, outside of like Devin White or something like that, to a guy who can do that. Now, he's not amazing the way that some Steelers fans do think he is. He's not somebody who's going to shut down players if he does end up getting thrown into man coverage somehow. He's just whatever at it. And as a run defender, while I like him a lot, he's going to be all around the ball. He's not this super smart, crazy quick reactor who's going to get in the backfield and stop stuff. He's not at that level, but overall, super useful player, fits the scheme very well. They also just traded for Joe Schobert. This one is a little bit confusing to me because of the presence of Robert Spillane, but whatever. Joe Schobert is a pretty good player who fits the scheme well. He is somebody who actually fits the description, kind of like Devin Bush, of a player who can cover a lot of ground and pass coverage in the middle of the field. Now, he's not nearly as good at it, and he's more of you can kind of get away with it as opposed to he's going to help in that role. But as your number 2 linebacker, that's you're not doing too bad. And as a run defender, he sketches me out a little bit if he's in a bad run defense. We literally saw that with the Jaguars and even the Browns before that. But with how good the front 3 is in front of him, that lets him not get so exploited with his lack of ability to make run fits or read offenses in the run game. And he can do his job just fine in that scenario. So I do end up liking him as a player for them. And then you have Robert Spillane, who's kind of like the same dude as Joe Schobert, frankly. Robert Spillane is definitely a starting level player. He's good. Despite being asked again to do a lot for the Steelers. Now, he went down fairly late in the season with a knee injury. Maybe that's why. I'm not sure what his current status is. But when the dude's on the field, again, he can cover enough ground to be relevant. He's pretty good as a run defender. He's going to get in passing lanes. Robert Spillane, I'm a big fan. Past time, you don't have much depth. Marcus Allen played some snaps, not very good, converted safety. At corner, so here I will say defensively is definitely where the biggest question marks come up. You're fine at number 1 with Joe Hayden. Joe Hayden is a guy who fits the scheme, again, very well. He's a smart veteran who plays the ball in the air better than a lot of corners do. So when he's asked to play, some of this cover 3 stuff where he's just dropping out from the line of scrimmage really quickly, he can get back there. He still has straight line speed enough to keep up with good receivers, and he can make plays on the ball. And they don't ask him to do a lot else. They don't put a lot of stress on their corners to play tight man coverage. So he can kind of get away with stuff, and just being a read-react player is pretty smart. Joe Hayden's pretty good. He fits the scheme well again. The number 2 corner spot, though, we'll see. So that Cam Sutton ranking, the 17th, that looks really good. That is out of slot corners where he played last year. As an outside guy, there's a chance he's all right for sure, especially with, again, the not non-pressure that this team puts on their corners, but that's not a guarantee. He did show some okay things as a zone reaction player, but again, it's a small sample size, and it's not like he was out here shutting down dudes. He was just kind of being okay. So we'll see how that goes. They also have Justin Lane, former third-round pick. He kind of the opposite of Sutton, where he does not. He's probably more talented, I guess, but not somebody who fits the scheme well. More of a press man corner, or at least he was supposed to be coming out of college, who hasn't exactly shown to be very good in the NFL. Now he's okay at times, but it is, again, he's barely gotten on the field, frankly. So we'll see. I'm not super excited about him. And then past that, you don't really. James Pierre's been in their system a little bit, but it's nothing. And then the slot corner. So this is the big bad one. Right now, looks like they're going to be going into week 1 with Antoine Brooks starting in slot corner. Antoine Brooks is a late round safety who hasn't gotten on the field barely at all in his first couple of years in the league, who's looking at maybe moving into a starting slot corner position. Now, as a former safety, I'd say there's definitely a chance he's a useful run defender for them, and that he can make some plays near the line of scrimmage. But as a guy who's going to be asked to cover modern NFL slot receivers with how goddamn good they are, he sketches me out quite a bit. We'll see how it goes. They put more pressure on their slot corner than they do on their outside guys. I don't know if they're going to change their stuff around, whatever. I don't know. We'll see. They do bring in Arthur Mullet, though, a player I mentioned before that I'm actually fine with. He's not a high-end player by any means. That 84th ranking is out of outside corners, by the way, where he more played with the Jets. He played slot there, too. He's a guy where I'd be probably more comfortable with him starting because I'm pretty sure he's not going to suck. But again, he's somebody who's not really adding anything to your defense. At safety, Minkah Fitzpatrick is awesome. He fits the scheme amazingly. Super good playmaker. Very, very, very smart player as far as pass coverage goes. One of the guys who has some true center fielder range and can actually keep up with even better tight ends and main coverage. Overall, very good. A little weak in run support, and he's not perfect as a deep safety. He's not, obviously he's not Ed Reed, but I don't even think he's on the level of Kevin Byard or something like that. But he's pretty damn close. And overall, I have no complaints about Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's really good. Their other safety, though, Terrell Edmonds, former first-round pick for some reason. And that is for some reason has shown up. He's just not all that good. Now, he's not horrible, to be clear. He is a player who does play smart generally and disciplined, isn't going to get too far out of position, and can make some plays in the run game. However, he's very limited athletically. His range concerns me. And as far as actually getting tested in coverage, I think he's more often than not going to fail those tests, which is a concern. Now, with how good this defense is around him, and it's not, with him playing in a scheme where he's doing goofy zone stuff as opposed to true downfield safety plays or manning up guys, whatever. You can get away with a lot of that stuff, but that doesn't mean that his weaknesses aren't still there, because at the end of the day, no matter what scheme you're playing, you do end up having to cover guys, which is where Terrell Edmonds starts to get more concerning. But regardless of that, when you talk about how this defense works as a whole, you're still talking about a team with an absolutely dominant front seven, specifically front three plus TJ Watt, that is going to be so good about pass rushing that they're going to really limit what most opposing offenses can do. And in the secondary, while I'm concerned about Edmonds, I'm very much concerned about Antoine Brooks. They're going to be playing this really complicated stuff that confuses quarterbacks just from the first step, regardless of how talented or not talented the defenders are, which kind of bails them out in a lot of ways against most teams. And you have good, decent coverage linebackers and Joe Hayden, make it they're still going to be overall pretty damn good because they always are, and a lot of it has to do with the way they scheme and how dominant they are up front. So when you look at their schedule, what's concerning? Well, offensively, right, there are two ways that you can kind of got if you're the Steelers offense, and it's by a really good defensive front who's going to take advantage of your probably bad offensive line, specifically on the interior, or it's teams that have enough good corners to cover. Because as opposed to other teams like elite receiver groups, the Steelers guys are not uncoverable. They're just pretty good. But if you catch a team like the Patriots or the Dolphins or something like that with enough good corners, there I'd start to get concerned as well, because you're taking a lot of the consistency out of this offense with that. Well, does that exist on their schedule? Honestly, not that much. Right. There are some good fronts they play. They do play the Broncos. The Bengals are a little bit underrated. They play the Bears. That matchup worries me for sure. Ravens, Vikings later in the season, but they don't catch the Buccaneers. They don't have to play themselves, right? Like, there's not all that many dominant fronts to the way that I'm scared for this team. And then secondary wise, who fits the description? The Bengals have some good corners, but it's more of a neutral matchup, which is going to favor the offense. Like they don't play the Ravens is the big one with that actually, but they don't play a lot of teams where I'm like, oh yeah, they're not going to at least have one positive matchup in the passing game. So schedule wise, they're still doing okay. And defensively, they're still going to confuse and beat so many of the non-elite corners in the NFL that really it comes down to, I'm just worried about teams that can either handle their pressure up front, have a good enough offensive line to do so, or have a quarterback who's smart, veteran, like experienced enough to not be concerned with all the goofy shit they do on defense and kind of see through it and beat their actually individually kind of bad players. They do catch the Packers in week 4 for sure. They, you see Russell Wilson on there, but other than that, and Patrick Mahomes in week 16 too. But other than that, a lot of these quarterbacks, while good at a lot of individual things, in this specific matchup still concern me. So, they're going to be very competitive still. They're going to be pretty good with how good their defense is. I don't think they have a ceiling as a team to really compete with the high end of the AFC, the high end. But as a playoff team, yeah, they're still looking pretty decent. So that's the Steelers for 2021.